3 statistical secrets that you need to know heading into the Hungarian Grand Prix. Welcome to the Pitwall, your stop for fantasy Formula 1 content. You can like and subscribe for more content like this. I'm J-Jack, and let's go. The first statistical secret is the weather. The Hungaroring, resurfaced in 2016, has been raced many a season since then and has given often mixed conditions. Unpredictable racing has ensued. Last year we had a huge pileup into turn 1 because of this wet race that started, and then it immediately dried up, which left Hamilton alone on the grid as everyone else went into the pits to switch on to slick tires. I double checked, this is local time that we're seeing here in the weather, so I have to make sure I'm cross-referencing this, not with my time, but with local time. So if we see here the temperature as it fluctuates, precipitation as it gets early into the morning, it's going to get high percentages for rain. Let's jump into Saturday so we can get it directly. Free practice session in local time is at 1 p.m. And so we see there is a 78% chance for rain. Qualifying down at 4 p.m. So you still have this high chance of precipitation. Now, if we get into the Sunday, when we have the race 3 p.m., there is much smaller chance, but there is this bump up here, but that's probably going to dry out. And if not, then there'll be a little bit of wet at the start of the race. But this is going to be important because who do you think is going to have good wet performance, especially because what we're going to be looking at with the tire performance and the upgrades that the teams have brought, that could all go out the window for qualifying. But we still need to look at the data to see how they're going to perform at the race, which now brings us to the difficulty of the track. The Hungaroring is very tight, very hard to pass people. We had Ocon last year who was able to fend off Vettel for many laps, pretty much the duration of the race after the restart. We had Alonso who kept Hamilton behind for many laps, which kept him from being able to surge forward and attacking Alonso's teammate, potentially for the race win. But with the new regulations, we have this opportunity for drivers to be closer together. But this is now going to have an interesting twist as we go to some of the upgrades that were brought to the Hungaroring. This now brings us to our second statistical secret: upgrades and performance. McLaren brought an interesting upgrade at France, and now they're unlocking the pace, as we're going to see when we get down to their lap times. But let me show with you who brought their major upgrades for this race. We have Haas. Now only Magnussen is receiving the major upgrade that Haas is bringing this season, giving it to his car. It's going to look much more like the Ferrari. Shout out to Albert Fabrega on Twitter, posting, as you can see, it looks like the slide of that Ferrari is now been implemented on the Haas. And so that is what we're looking at the Haas. Another view of important update is the Aston Martin. Remember how I talked about how you need to be able to attack each other close on track? Well, we've got this very peculiar device that is getting around the loophole of the regulations. Albert Fabrega, again, maybe you need to follow. Get him on Twitter. He's got some really good pictures. The wings are supposed to curve up here and not have outwash, which is supposed to hit the air up and over the cars behind. And that means that there's also less downforce. What we see here with this Aston Martin is that these winglets are allowing the air to pass up in such a way that it could cause dirty air for the car behind, but most importantly, it's causing a lot more downforce for the car, and that is what the Aston Martin is needing. And we're going to be looking at to see how that impacted the drivers with their times. And as you can see here, Giuliano Duchessa, we have pictures as well from the paddock, and you can see it much more clearly how this wing is much more boxy and curved on the edges. And that is what the team says. They've double-checked with the FIA. If the FIA is going to allow this, expect a bunch of teams to be bringing these for the future races, and that's going to be significant. Here is Craig Scarborough. I'd also recommend you follow him on Twitter. He's explaining how the standard wing is supposed to be with the curved edges and how it causes the flow, and then what Aston Martin had brought, which is allow a higher pressure area and get around the loopholes of the regulations. So, do these upgrades make a difference for these teams? Well, let's look at their lap times to find out. You can find the link in the description below for the spreadsheet, and you can find these times. Here we have from free practice session 1 and free practice session 2 how their lap times were going. Free practice session 1 and free practice session 2, we're done with soft tires for their fastest times. Normally we see a variation of that in which you've got mediums, but here's the problem. Because of the coming rain on the Saturday, potentially affecting free practice session 3 and qualifying, they were trying to get out real quick and get their times. So my screenshot from free practice session 2 was their medium times before they all went on to softs, the exceptions being the Williams. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you these results here on the screen, and then we'll look at any notable differences. Of course, you can see from free practice session 1, Sainz setting a 1:18.750, Leclerc being able to go 0.3 faster in FP2, and Sainz being 0.2 seconds off the pace, whereas in free practice session 1, Leclerc was almost 0.3, but 0.289 off of the top pace. Now, during free practice session 2, we had Norris with a stonking lap, and we have Ricciardo in 5th with a really good lap that was only 0.4 off the top. You notice the Mercedes are nowhere. Russell in 8th, Hamilton in 11th. But let's compare these to medium times. Oh, actually, I mistook that. So Russell had set a fastest time on softs, and he was 4th fastest when everyone else was on mediums. I don't actually have his time, but we see that Hamilton was all the way down in the 16th when he had his lap time on mediums. And so we see that they are going to be much quicker on softs and qualifying. Now, of course, if it's raining, that's going to impact things. Let's look at how the upgrades for the Haas's fared. Magnussen in FP1, he is but 1/10 faster than Schumacher, and in FP2, he is barely faster than Schumacher again. So what is going on with those upgrades? Well, maybe they weren't pushing it, maybe they're trying to be consistent, but that does not bode well when you've got the Haas drivers averaging 17th and 18th fastest. Then we have to look, like I said, at how the Aston Martin upgrades were. Stroll and Vettel were right next to each other in FP1, 11th and 12th. Vettel was able to find something special in FP2, getting 7th fastest, which brings his average up to 9th fastest, tied with Hamilton. And so we see that the upgrades for Aston Martin is going to make a big difference. And like I said, if this is something that is going to be okayed in the regulations, whoo-wee, we're going to be having a lot of teams bringing those up. Now, this race has a summer break right afterward, and so the teams are not allowed to be working on the cars during that break. It's a factory, everybody is on holiday. So it'll be interesting to see what the teams can actually put together when they get back from the factory. Let's look at our average for the teams. Ferrari is clearly commanding in the lead. We actually have McLaren having a faster average than the Red Bulls. That's going to be very interesting if you're looking at your lineups and trying to figure out budgeting how you want to put the McLarens in there. And the reason why we want to look at our budget is because of the streaks that are coming into play this race. Our third statistical secret is streaks. Verstappen, only one eligible for a race streak. That would give him plus 10 points. Leclerc would have been as well, but, you know, he DNF'd last race. Now, Verstappen, if we look over on the left, has the highest points. He is 75% of the time in the top 5 point scorers. You look at Russell, who's got 92%. That is crazy if you think about it, but Russell is not looking as strong. Maybe in FP3, you can see that they're putting something together. It wasn't major upgrades, but the Mercedes did bring something to this circuit, and so they're still trying to figure it out. But if you look at Leclerc and Sainz, Leclerc 58% in the top 5, Sainz 67%, but we see here that Sainz in the last 3 races has been averaging 30 points, whereas Leclerc's 29. You compare that with Perez, who's been down at 21, but Norris up 23 average points. And if Ricciardo, of course, is languishing in 10 points per average, but if you have Norris as a potential option based off your budget, he might be someone who could pair alongside a Verstappen, maybe even if Perez gets replaced with Norris. We saw something very interesting last race in France. Perez, for whatever reason, wasn't able to get the traction he needed on that track, and he was getting passed throughout the race. And if that's going to be a problem again this race, then you might want to consider some other options to be able to pad out a stronger budget when you're trying to get Verstappen on your team. Do not mind the quality streak error I have from Mercedes. I'm still trying to figure out in my spreadsheet. Actually, let me show you my performance tab where I put in all the data raw. Everything's supposed to be auto-calculated. It's supposed to be really great, but then I'm going to be scrolling. Here, this is the engine that creates the spreadsheet. This is all the automated things. As you can see, if one thing's wrong, then I'm going to need to make sure that it's figuring out. It has to be something with how team is calculating the two drivers, because I was looking and cross-referencing all the other points, and they seem to be good. But Mercedes is eligible for a race streak. Mercedes is way too expensive. If you look at their points per million, Mercedes is at a 1.5 points per million, but a negative 0.7 value. So Red Bull and Ferrari are still the two options. If you're looking for a budget, even though McLaren is overpriced by 2.5%, if they're going to be in the top 5, top 10, and outpacing Ferraris or Red Bulls, but it would have to come down to Ferrari having reliability issues. It seems that the Ferraris are still the fastest cars at this track. And going back to Alpine and McLaren with their race streaks, that could be another option to sweeten your deal if you're thinking about a cheaper option. And lastly, we're going to be looking at our driver prices, because while Verstappen is the only one who got to a race streak, if you have not used your mega driver, this is the last race that you can use it before the summer break, in which it gets reset, and then everyone gets another mega driver option, another wildcard option. So if you have not used your mega driver, use it this race, and preferably on Verstappen, because that 10 points would translate into 30 points when it's multiplied. So if you're going to get Verstappen, who's quite expensive on your team, I want to highlight in yellow on the spreadsheet, these are people that are within 0.1 to 0.3 million gap between them. So we see that there's a 0.2 gap between the two Haas drivers. There's a 0.1 gap between Zhou and Tsunoda. I'm probably not going to consider either of these drivers, but here are the ones that'll be interesting. Gasly, Alonso, and Ocon. Those are very similar priced, and because Norris and Ricciardo are more expensive, it's hard for me, who's usually got Alonso, to be able to jump straight to a Norris. That's why I'm having to take this consideration. But let's double check how they did during FP1 and FP2. So we had Norris, who is averaging third, just like Verstappen, and then Alonso is eighth. Jumping from an eighth to a podium, that might be worth the extra 3 million if you can get your budget to go around it. Gasly languaging in 14th. Oof. We have Ocon here in 11th. Vettel may be a sleeper pick, because here he is in 9th, but I believe if we double check their price values, Vettel is 11.4 million. Oh, okay, so Vettel is cheaper than Alonso. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a big gap between the two. If you can just jump over the Norris, then that's going to be really great. It's now time for my picks. I haven't talked about it recently, but as you can see here, that I haven't been day trading, and that's because of the unpredictability of the market, not wanting to use my picks unless it's for reliability issues to sub a guy in and out. And as a result, my team 2, which was $1 million down, or even 1.2 million down at one point, is now within 0.2. Been trying to keep Verstappen and a Ferrari, just trying something different on team 1 compared to team 2, but team 2 is starting to pull away because of some of the reliability issues when you have Leclerc by himself. But this time I decided I was going to try to go Verstappen, Perez, and Leclerc. Try to get all 3 of these on the same team, and hopefully that Ferrari can have good races and stop breaking down. That's the big difference, is my Ferrari and Red Bull scores. Now, if I'm looking here, and I'm looking at a potential situation where Magnussen has these upgrades, but it may not be as good, but he is still cheaper than Schumacher, and with the upgrades, he should be faster. If I take out Schumacher, I have 8.7, and if I'm really trying to get somebody in here that could help out, like a Norris, that's 15.9, right? I can't get him on if I have a Verstappen and a Perez. So if I take out Perez and I put in Sainz, now Sainz here's tricky. He's hovering at 99%, so I don't want to put him in until after he's gone down. But let's say I do put Sainz in, that it gives me a little bit more money, but not enough to pick up someone like Norris. And so if you're looking down at the 9.6 or cheaper, Bottas can't even get Vettel, which is unfortunate. Maybe if Stroll's able to put something together, he is a very consistent pick. Maybe I would consider putting him in, but you would have to watch free practice session 3. I do not want to put in any of the Williams, unless you say the Williams starting at the back are going to have the benefit of everyone crashing or having problems, but I don't want to necessarily go down that road. Now let's say I want to do something crazy and I want to go for the McLaren. 17.9, that would then, as a driver, allow me the double dip and pick up Norris. that would be risky because if I did this lineup, then it locks me in. But then I get a wild card, and maybe what I could do then after that is I could wild card to get back to the lineup I was wanting. But who knows? Actually, yeah, I don't want McLaren for the long run. Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen would be good, but then Verstappen would be too expensive, so that maybe I'd jump down to, let's see, could I jump down to Perez? Actually, I'd eventually want to get over the Red Bull. Well, no, because Ferrari thinks that they could win the rest of the season. So if I don't have reliability issues and I can stay with Ferrari, then Perez, yeah, I could pick him up. Oh, 24.1? I could get the really consistent George Russell in there. Ooh, this is a really good team. Man, I'm going to have to remember this. This all predicates though that I don't lose value. Yeah, let's review this one more time. So I've got this team right here, and if I wanted to go crazy with it, right, I would drop Schumacher, I'd drop Perez, and I'd drop Ferrari. I would pick up McLaren, I would pick up then Sainz, and then I'd pick up Norris. And then after this race is over and hopefully I get my benefit, then I could, because Verstappen would be overpriced again, then after this update, I could use a wild card to day trade if that happens, or let's see, I could get rid of these two, right? So I would get rid of Verstappen, that I could pick up Ferrari, and then I would pick up Russell. There we go. So then I could have the two, man, not having any Red Bulls would be very gutsy. Well, we'll have to see. Let's go over now, discard that, undo that, and go to Team 2. Team 2 is riding the Red Bull train, but if it looks like the Ferraris are going to be faster, but then what about this reliability issue? Oof. Okay, so let's see. This is my consistent team. Let's say I did switch over. Wow, Red Bull's gone up by 0.6 million. That's the thing, though. If they're going to keep pumping Red Bull, I might as well keep it just for the money. But let's say, though, that I am trying to keep Red Bull as my alternative, and I get rid of these guys. Who could I work with? If I'm trying to pick up Norris for 0.6, so I would have to drop Perez, 22.1. Well, I'm going to have to pick up someone like a Magnussen, and then that would leave me 16.7. 16.7. Well, if that's the case, then you might as well keep Alonso. Well, I could, yeah, I might as well keep Alonso if that's the case. So you drop a Red Bull, you go a Ferrari, which then allows me to drop Albon and pick up with 15.1. Okay, so then what I would then do with this is I would have to pick up Norris and Vettel. Yep, that's what I'd have to do. If I wanted to do this, that could be an alternative option. So there's a lot of variability here, especially with our budgets. You know, if I had been more, consistent with day trading, but it's just been with the Hacker Man. If you got questions about that, you can put in the comments below. Pretty much there's this alleged 12 to 15,000 bots, and it's such an unpredictable market. And so I've been trying to not deal with that. If I use a wild card, maybe I'd get into the day trading, but he likes to troll. He'll rise a guy just so everyone switches over to him and then drop him. Anyways, put in your comments below. You can continue this discussion on Discord. Link in the description below for any questions you might have. Also follow us on Twitter. At this time, I'd like to promo for you our Pitwall Seasonal League. This is where you can submit up to 3 teams, see how everyone's doing throughout the globe, and use their strategies. We've got 2,600 points, Jason S., and the nice thing is you can see their lineups. And so he's been running the Verstappen, Schumacher, Alonso, Magnussen, Leclerc, Red Bull. Pretty solid lineup. And we have Butrus, and he's been running the Perez, Russell, Leclerc, Magnussen, Verstappen, Haas lineup. And then Neringa has been running a Magnussen, Leclerc, Norris, Alonso, Perez, Red Bull lineup. So there's a lot of variability. But if you would like a challenge, a one race challenge, one team, one submission, one opportunity to get on our one race challenge leaderboard. Anytime I use the word ORC, that stands for one race challenge. Here you cannot click on people and see their lineups because this is a first time submission. And so we have 26 people who've entered. You can join in. If we can get enough people to get at least 50 in our league, then that means we are eligible for our season-long large league performances. We haven't been able to be a part of that in quite some time, but I'm looking forward to all of you who want to join. And if you get a top 3 score in our one race challenge, you get a special shout out in our race results video, as well as a special podium ceremony at the end of that video where the top step gets to hear their national anthem. And so I look forward to all of you who will be joining us for this grand one race challenge. And there we have it. Thank you so much for taking the time with this statistical deep dive, looking at all the unpredictability that may come here with Hungary. So you want to pay attention to the free practice session 3. You want to see which drivers are seeming to improve and which ones the teams are able to balance out so that their tires are optimal for this track. And lastly, because of how tight this track is, don't forget, quali is king. Whoever gets qualifying higher are having a better chance of keeping it during the race because it's so hard to pass. But if there's rain during qualifying, the whole thing might get shook up. And so, let's see what happens. And until next time, we'll see you on the pit wall.